If you care about history not as trivia, but as hard-won knowledge, this episode is for you. Before we go any further, subscribe to Atten Recounts, because this channel exists for people who understand that the past is not dead weight. It is a survival manual written in blood, cold, and scarcity. What you are about to hear is not romantic nostalgia or speculative storytelling. These are 5 technologies that once stood between people and death, quietly perfected long before electricity, GPS, or plastic packaging. Most of them are barely taught anymore. All of them still work. Here is the hook, and it deserves your full attention. Every major collapse, expedition failure, and mass casualty event in history shares a pattern. The tools fail first. The supply chains break next. And what saves people is never innovation in the moment, but remembered knowledge. These technologies carried explorers across polar ice, soldiers through blockades, and isolated communities through generations of famine and war. They were abandoned not because they stopped working, but because convenience replaced competence. If modern systems fail, and history says they eventually do, these are the techniques that still function with nothing but human skill and basic materials. Let's get into them. The fire piston proves that ignition does not require sparks or fuel. Long before matches, lighters, or flint wheels, fire pistons were used across Southeast Asia and parts of Europe to start fires instantly. This device relies on rapid air compression to ignite tinder, a principle later used in diesel engines. A small piston is driven into a sealed cylinder, compressing air so quickly that the temperature spikes and ignites char cloth or similar material. In practical terms, this means fire with no flame source, no electricity, and no consumable fuel. If you understand the principle, you can replicate it with hardwood, leather seals, and plant fiber. In a survival context, this matters because fire is not optional. It sterilizes water, preserves calories, and regulates body temperature. A modern application is simple. Keep a compact fire piston, or learn to fabricate one. It works in rain, wind, and cold, where lighters routinely fail. Charcoal-based water filtration kept entire cities alive before plumbing existed. Clean water has always been the real bottleneck of survival, and, well, charcoal filtration predates modern treatment plants by centuries. Ancient civilizations understood that passing water through layers of sand, gravel, and charcoal removed not just debris, but disease. Charcoal binds toxins through adsorption, a process still used in modern filters and medical detoxification. The forgotten part is that this system can be built anywhere. In an emergency, crushed hardwood charcoal layered between cloth and sand can significantly reduce pathogens and chemical contaminants. Boiling afterward completes the process. This knowledge turns stagnant water into a viable resource. History is clear on this point. Armies and cities that controlled water survived sieges longer than those with better weapons. Today, this technique is ignored until disaster forces people to rediscover it too late. The heliograph shows quite clearly that long-distance signaling does not depend on electronics. The heliograph, which is a mirror-based signaling device, was used extensively back in the 19th century by militaries operating in deserts and mountains. With nothing but reflected sunlight, trained operators could send coded messages across tens of miles with remarkable precision. Unlike radios, mirrors don't fail from drained batteries, electromagnetic interference, or software faults. The practical application is, honestly, pretty straightforward. A polished metal surface, or even just a piece of glass, can be used to signal rescuers, aircraft, or distant parties. Learning controlled flashes and basic signal discipline dramatically increases your chance of rescue in open terrain. History, as it turns out, favours those who could communicate when infrastructure collapsed. This technology is silent, invisible to the untrained eye, and when understood, it's devastatingly effective. Traditional cold-weather shelters, when built correctly, outperform modern emergency gear. Snow trenches, quinsy shelters, and sod huts were not simply primitive guesses. They were, in fact, engineered responses to thermal physics. Snow, counterintuitively, is actually an excellent insulator. A properly constructed snow shelter can maintain interior temperatures far above lethal thresholds, even in extreme cold. The mistake modern survivors make is relying on thin synthetic tents and assuming insulation comes from material rather than structure. Historical Arctic populations survived because they shaped their environment intelligently. The technique matters. Compacted snow walls, ventilation holes to prevent carbon monoxide buildup, and raised sleeping platforms to avoid cold sinks. These shelters require time and knowledge, not equipment. When exposure is the real killer, this understanding is more valuable than any store-bought survival kit. Pemmican demonstrates that calorie density is more important than food variety. Explorers crossing polar regions and indigenous cultures surviving harsh winters relied on pemmican for a reason. It is a near-perfect survival food, combining rendered fat and dried protein into a shelf-stable, calorie-dense ration. Pound for pound, it delivers sustained energy unmatched by modern packaged foods. The practical lesson is not just about pemmican itself, but about nutritional priorities under stress. Fat sustains body heat and endurance. Protein maintains muscle and recovery. Carbohydrates are secondary when resupply is uncertain. Learning to prepare and store such food is a direct inheritance from people who understood starvation not as an abstract concept, but as a seasonal certainty. History does not forget these technologies by accident. It forgets them because comfort breeds dependence. The people who survived worst-case scenarios were not the most advanced, but the most prepared. If you found this valuable, subscribe to Atten Recounts, share this episode with someone who still thinks survival is about gadgets, and stay with us. The past has more to teach, and ignoring it has never ended well.